No one thinks they have a breaking point until they find themselves staring at their own reflection in a cracked school bathroom mirror, wondering if an ID card strap is strong enough to stop the world from spinning. I was 11 years old, a sixth grader who should have been worrying about playground games or lunch money. Instead, I was calculating the tensile strength of nylon. My lungs felt like they were filled with concrete because my report card had a blemish, a grade that wasn't a perfect mark. I didn't know then that strangling yourself doesn't work that way, that the instinct to live is a biological trap. I just knew that a B was a death sentence in my house. To my mother, I wasn't a daughter. I was a project, a piece of raw marble she was determined to chisel into a monument of her own ego. My name is Anabel, and for 23 years, I have lived as a ghost inside a high achiever's skin. My mother loves the woman I became, the successful, intelligent adult she brags about at dinner parties, but I know the truth. She would have walked over the cold, small corpse of a child I was just to ensure her trophy was polished. The violence was never random. It was a curriculum. In my household, academic pressure wasn't a suggestion. It was the atmosphere we breathed. From the age of 5, my life was a series of timed tests and flashcards. If I stumbled over a word or failed to memorize a multiplication table fast enough, the atmosphere shifted. It started with the look, that cold, predatory narrowing of her eyes that signaled the end of my safety. Then came the strikes. I was beaten regularly until I was 14 or 15 years old. The physical pain was sharp, but it was the conditional nature of her touch that truly broke me. I was only held or hugged when I brought home a trophy. My skin learned to associate love with the smell of ink and the texture of high-grade paper. If the marks were good, I was her precious girl. If they were anything less than perfect, I was a disgrace, a lazy dog, an embarrassment to a family that demanded nothing but excellence. I didn't study because I wanted to learn. I studied because I wanted to survive the night without a bruise. I grew up in a house that felt like a courtroom where I was always the defendant. My mother's pride was a weapon she used to keep me in line. She would sit me down and compare me to the children of her friends, her voice dripping with a poisonous kind of envy. "Look at Rahul," she would hiss. "He scored a 98% in math. Are you less than him? Are you stupid?" I began to view every other child not as a peer, but as a threat to my existence. If they succeeded, I was failing by default. This comparison created a deep-seated rot in my soul, a feral need to outperform everyone just to keep the peace at home. I became a machine, a hollow vessel for academic data. My mother doesn't accept to this day that she did anything wrong. She views those years of physical and emotional battery as discipline. She takes full credit for my current career, telling everyone that her firm hand is the reason I am so successful today. She doesn't realize that she didn't raise a genius. She just broke a child until the only thing left was a habit of performance. The day of the ID card incident remains etched in my mind like a scar. It was a Tuesday, the day the midterm results were released. I had scored an 82 in science. In any other world, that's a decent grade, but in my mother's world, it was an insult. I remember sitting in the back of the school bus, my heart hammering against my ribs, so hard it felt like it would crack. I couldn't go home. I couldn't face the belt, the slaps, or the way she would look at me like I was something she found on the bottom of her shoe. I walked into the school washroom, locked the stall, and took off my ID card. I wrapped the blue strap around my throat and pulled. I wanted the pressure to stop. I wanted the expectation to vanish. I wanted to be nothing. But as I choked, gasping for air, I realized I didn't know how to die. I just slumped against the cold tile, crying silently so the other girls wouldn't hear me. I was 11 years old, and I already preferred death to a B grade. When I finally went home that day, I hid the science paper. I lived in a state of constant, vibrating anxiety for 3 days, waiting for the inevitable phone call from the teacher or the parent-teacher meeting. The feral nature of my existence meant that I became an expert liar. I learned to forge signatures, to alter marks with a fine-tip pen, and to manipulate conversations to keep her away from the truth. My mother thinks she raised an honest, upright woman, but she actually forced me to become a master of deception. My social skills were non-existent because every spare second was dedicated to the books. I didn't know how to make friends. I only knew how to compete. I was an intelligent adult in the making, but internally, I was a starving dog, begging for a scrap of genuine, unconditional affection that never came. My mother would tell me, "I do this because I love you," as she swung the cane. That was the first and most dangerous lie I ever learned to believe. That love is synonymous with pain and performance. By the time I reached high school, the physical beating slowed down, not because she grew kinder, but because I had become too good at the game. I was the top of my class, the valedictorian in waiting, the girl everyone pointed to as a success story. My mother walked through the school hallways like a queen, absorbing the praise of other parents. "You're so lucky to have Anabel," they would say. She would smile that practiced, gracious smile and say, "Oh, it's just how we raised her. Excellence is a habit." I wanted to scream. I wanted to pull up my sleeves and show them the phantom marks of the years before. I wanted to tell them that I didn't have a personality, I just had a GPA. I was practically feral in my lack of self-identity. I didn't know what music I liked, what hobbies I enjoyed, or who I was outside of a classroom. I was a product, a high-end commodity manufactured through trauma. I was the result of a mother who valued the what over the who. The academic pressure was an insane, suffocating weight that never lifted. Even during summer breaks, I was enrolled in advanced coaching classes. My mother would say that rest is for the weak, and the world doesn't wait for those who sleep. I spent my teenage years in a room that felt more like a prison cell, surrounded by stacks of paper and the constant ticking of a clock. Whenever I tried to express exhaustion, she would dismiss it. "You think this is hard? I gave up my life for you. I sacrifice everything so you can be someone." This was the guilt trip that kept the engine running. I felt like I owed her my soul because she had provided the treats and toys, the food, the shelter, the books. Like a dog being rewarded for a trick, I would perform, waiting for that fleeting moment of approval. But that approval was a moving goalpost. Once I reached a 95, she wanted a 98. Once I was first in class, she wanted me to be first in the state. There is a specific kind of loneliness that comes from being compared to others constantly. It makes you look at every human connection through the lens of a balance sheet. Even now, as a 23-year-old woman, I struggle to have a healthy approach towards achievements. I don't know how to be proud of myself. When I land a major promotion or win an award, my first instinct isn't joy. It's a terrifying sense of relief that I'm not being punished. I'm still that little girl in the school washroom, checking the strength of the strap. My mother thinks she gave me a gift by pushing me so hard. She sits at the dinner table today and takes pride in my salary, my title, my intelligence. She doesn't understand that every time she brags about me, she is digging a knife into a wound that never healed. She loves the version of me that earns money and status, but she never even knew the child who just wanted to play in the dirt without being told it was a waste of time. I remember a time when I was 14, and I came home with a second-place trophy for an essay competition. I was actually proud of it. The topic was something I cared about. I walked into the kitchen and set it on the counter. My mother didn't even look up from her tea. She just asked who got first. When I told her it was a girl named Sarah, she scoffed. Sarah's mother works 2 jobs and still has time to tutor her. "You have everything, and you still can't be the best? What a waste." That trophy sat on the counter for a week before she threw it in the trash. That was the moment I realized that being good was worthless. Only being the best granted me the right to occupy space in her house. It's a habit that has ruined my adult relationships. I constantly feel like I have to earn the love of my friends and my partner. I feel like if I am not constantly providing value, constantly being impressive, I will be discarded. I am a feral creature trying to pass as a human, still waiting for the next strike. The transition to adulthood was like stepping out of a dark room into a blinding light. I left home for university, and for the first time, I was in charge of my own schedule. I had a mental breakdown within the first month. Without the threat of physical violence or the constant shadow of my mother's disapproval, I didn't know how to function. I had no internal discipline because my discipline had always been external. I spent weeks staring at a blank textbook, unable to study because there was no one there to beat me if I didn't. This is the part people don't see when they praise strict parents. They don't see the paralyzed adult who doesn't know how to move without a leash. I had to learn how to be a person from scratch. I had to learn that it was okay to fail, okay to be average, okay to just be. My mother, of course, viewed my struggles as weakness and ingratitude. She would call me and say, "After everything I did for you, you're going to fail now?" It's been a real trip to experience a supportive, emotional, and loving relationship for the first time. I met a man who didn't care about my resume or my GPA. The first time he told me he loved me, I asked him, why? What did I do? He looked at me with such confusion and said, "You didn't do anything, Anabel. I just love you." I cried for 3 hours. I didn't understand the concept of love as a state of being rather than a reward for a performance. It felt like a foreign language. My mother hates him, of course. She thinks he makes me soft. She thinks he's distracting me from my potential. To her, a partner is just another metric for success, someone with a high-status job who can enhance her image. When she realized she couldn't control this part of my life, she turned to her favorite weapon, the victim card. She began telling the extended family that I was abandoning her, that I was forgetting the woman who made me everything I am. The truth is, my mother is a victim too, but that doesn't excuse the blood on her hands. Her own parents raised her with the same iron fist. My grandfather was a man who viewed children as property, and his father before him was even worse. It's a chain of generational trauma that stretches back decades. I can see the cycle clearly now. The Mad Men style stoicism mixed with a heritage of even darker, more violent roots. She was raised to believe that a child's only value is their utility. But here is the difference. She had the chance to change. She had the chance to look at her crying daughter and choose a different path. Instead, she doubled down. She took the abuse she received and refined it, modernized it, and turned it into an educational philosophy. She calls it parenting. I call it a slow-motion execution of a child's spirit. She wants to be thanked for the intelligence she beat into me. But you don't thank the fire for the scars it leaves behind, even if those scars make your skin thicker. The dullest moments of my life were the ones where I was supposedly at my peak. I remember my university graduation. I was at the top of my class, receiving the highest honors. My mother was in the front row, beaming, wearing an expensive outfit she'd bought specifically to outshine the other mothers. When I walked across the stage, the applause was deafening. But as I held that diploma, all I could think about was the ID card strap in the 6th grade washroom. I realized that this piece of paper was the treat I had been chasing like a dog for 15 years. I looked at my mother, and she wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the audience, making sure they saw her daughter winning. I realized then that I could win a Nobel Prize, and it still wouldn't be enough to make her love the real me. She only loved the reflection of her own success in my eyes. It was a hollow, empty victory. And that was the day I decided that the game had to end. The intelligent adult was going to finally stop performing. I began to pull back. I stopped calling her every day. I stopped sending her copies of my certificates. I stopped giving her the fuel she needed to maintain her Mother of the Year facade. The reaction was immediate and explosive. She started showing up at my apartment, screaming that I was ungrateful and cruel. She would remind me of the beating till the age of 14, as if it were a point of pride. "I made you," she would yell. "You would be nothing without me." And that's when I realized the core of her fear. She didn't fear my failure. She feared my independence. If I was successful and didn't credit her, her entire identity collapsed. She had no self outside of my achievements. She had spent 20 years destroying my personality to build her own. I was the host, and she was the parasite. I had to become feral in a different way. I had to learn how to bite back, not with violence, but with the cold, hard truth of my own autonomy. One evening, we had a family dinner with several of her high society friends. My mother was in her element, holding court and talking about my recent promotion. "Anabel has always been so driven," she chirped, sipping her wine. "I remember when she was just a little thing, she would spend all night studying. I never had to tell her twice. I just raised her to know the value of hard work." The guests nodded, looking at me with admiration. I felt the familiar bow rising in my throat. I looked at my mother. This woman who had watched me try to strangle myself and only cared that I didn't ruin my uniform. And I realized I was done being her trophy. Actually, I said, my voice steady and quiet, cutting through the chatter. I didn't study because I was driven. I studied because you used to beat me until I couldn't sit down if my marks were below an A. The silence that followed was so heavy it felt like it would crack the floor. My mother's face went from a triumphant pink to a ghostly, mottled gray. She laughed, a high, nervous sound. Oh, Anabel, you always had such a vivid imagination. Don't be so dramatic. But I didn't stop. I looked directly at her friend, a woman she'd known for 20 years. She didn't raise me to be intelligent. She broke me until studying was the only way I could feel safe. I tried to kill myself in 6th grade because of the pressure she put on me. Does she take pride in that, too? The guests were looking at their plates, the tension in the room unbearable. My mother was trembling, her Mother of the Year mask shattering into a million jagged pieces. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the defendant. I was the judge. I saw the fear in her eyes, the fear of being seen for who she truly was. She wasn't a dedicated mother. She was a bully who had gotten away with it because her victim was successful. This was the beginning of my revenge. It wasn't about hurting her physically. It was about stripping her of the only thing she valued, her reputation. The days after that dinner were a whirlwind of drama. My mother sent me hundreds of messages, alternating between "How could you do this to me?" and "You're a liar." She tried to get family members to intervene, telling them I was having a mental breakdown. But the seed was planted. People started looking at her differently. They remembered the times I had shown up to school with accidental bruises. They remembered how quiet and hollow I always seemed as a child. The intelligent adult they admired was now a living testament to her cruelty. I felt a strange sense of peace. I wasn't angry anymore, I was just done. I realized that if I work hard enough on my own problems, my kids will be the chosen ones, the ones who get to be the right mix of fucked up and normal without having to survive a war zone at home. I was a cycle breaker. My success was no longer hers. It was the fuel for my escape. I was finally moving from being raised like a dog to living like a human. My mother's refusal to accept her wrongdoing is her greatest weakness. Even now, she tells people I am delusional. She takes pride in the fact that she made me tough. She doesn't understand that being tough shouldn't involve wanting to die at 11. She doesn't understand that a healthy approach towards studies isn't about fear. I've started going to therapy, and it's been a grueling process of unlearning. My therapist tells me that my habit of studying just to be loved is a form of fawn response, a trauma survival tactic. I am 23, and I am finally learning how to read a book for pleasure. I am finally learning that my value isn't tied to a paycheck or a title. My mother hates this progress. She views therapy as brainwashing. She sees my healing as a direct attack on her legacy. But her legacy is a lie, and I am the one who is finally telling the truth. I decided to go no contact. No more dinners, no more phone calls, no more being her golden child. This is the ultimate revenge for a narcissist. To a woman who lives for the gaze of others, being ignored is a death sentence. I took my success, the career she built, and I moved to a city she doesn't visit. I stopped giving her the right to claim my life. I remember the last time we spoke. She told me, "You'll never be happy without me. I am the reason you are anything." I looked at her and felt nothing but pity. "No," I said. "I am the reason I am anything despite you." I hung up the phone and felt a weight lift that had been there since the 6th grade. I wasn't a dog anymore. I wasn't a machine. I was Anabel, and I was finally, for the first time, not being compared to anyone. The intelligent adult she bragged about was gone, and in her place was a woman who was finally learning how to love herself without conditions. The revenge continued in subtle, systemic ways. I started a blog anonymously, detailing the academic abuse in our culture. I wrote about the ID card strap, the beatings, and the insane pressure. It went viral. Thousands of people reached out, sharing their own stories of golden child trauma. My mother, who scours the internet for anything related to her interests, eventually found it. She didn't know it was me, but she started commenting on the posts, defending the strict parenting and saying the children were weak. I watched her fight with strangers online, desperately trying to protect a world that was already crumbling. She was defending a house that was already on fire. I realized that her entire life was a performance, and without me to play my part, she was just an actress on an empty stage. I was the narrator now, and I was writing the final chapter. Her pride was her prison, and I was the one who had walked away with the key. The consistency of her denial is truly a marvel. She still posts old photos of my graduations on her social media, pretending we are close. She still tells her neighbors that I'm too busy with my high-powered job to visit. She is living in a hallucination where she is still the hero of my story. But I am the one who pays my own bills. I am the one who chooses my own friends. I am the one who decided that my mother would never meet her grandchildren. That is the lesson. The greatest revenge isn't a single act of violence, it's a lifetime of absence. It's showing the person who tried to own you that they have zero power over your future. I am a survivor of academic pressure that nearly cost me my life. I am a survivor of a mother who loved my marks more than my heartbeat. And I am finally, a person who scored the only grade that matters, freedom. I look back at that 11-year-old girl in the washroom, and I want to tell her that it gets better. I want to tell her that intelligence isn't a curse, and that she will one day use that brain to build a life that doesn't involve fear. I want to tell her that she is not a dog, and she doesn't need to perform for treats. My mother would have walked over my corpse to get to her goal, but I didn't give her the satisfaction of dying. I lived. I succeeded. And then I took that success and used it to walk away from her forever. My younger self studied so she could be loved, but my adult self studies so she can be free. There is no loophole in this story, no hidden warmth I'm holding onto. It is a story of a betrayal so deep it changed my DNA, and a recovery so hard it made me a titan. My mother loves the woman I became, but she has no idea who that woman actually is. To anyone listening, know this. Generational trauma ends when someone has the courage to be the bad child. Be the one who speaks the truth. Be the one who refuses to be a trophy. My mother thinks she raised a success story, but she actually raised the witness who will testify against her legacy. My grandfather's abuse, my great-grandfather's Nazi history, it all ends with me. I am the chosen one because I chose myself over her pride. I work hard on my problems, so my future kids will never know the smell of an ID card strap in a school washroom. They will know that an A is just a letter and a B is just a letter, but their mother's love is a constant. I am Anabel and I am no longer feral. I am disciplined by my own will, socialized by my own heart, and I have a personality that is entirely, beautifully my own. My mother still tries to reach out through family members, using her aging health as a hook. She's your mother, they say. She did the best she could. I reply with the same calm, devastating logic. Doing your best doesn't involve beating a child until they are 14. Doing your best doesn't involve watching your daughter try to kill herself and then asking about her science marks. The best she could do was a nightmare, and I am no longer obligated to sleep in it. I have found my own wonderful wife, or partner, a person who sees the scars and loves the skin anyway. I have a support system that isn't built on achievement. I have a life that is dull in the best possible way. No screaming, no beatings, no insane pressure. Just the quiet, steady hum of a person who is finally, truly safe. So here is the final score. My mother has her pride, a collection of trophies and degrees that I left in her attic. I have my life, a collection of moments, mistakes, and genuine joys that she will never touch. She would have walked over my corpse, but instead, I walked over her ego to find the exit. The revenge is complete. The lesson is learned. Love is not a grade. Love is not a habit of performance. Love is the thing that remains when you stop trying to be intelligent and start trying to be kind, mostly to yourself. I am Anabel, and I am finally, perfectly and wonderfully normal. I don't need her to accept she was wrong. I only need to accept that I am right to be free. The girl in the washroom is finally out. The stall is unlocked, and the air has never tasted sweeter. Checkmate, mother. I am the one who got away.